Welcome to the Climate and Coordination RCast, where every week we'll be discussing topics related to all things climate change and RChain's role in the solution. We will be discussing technologies that can adapt and coordinate massive amounts of data like never before, forming social architectures that grow collective intelligence, sharing and evaluating data planetarily, all while maintaining personal privacy and personal data ownership. A new decentralized economy is forming as we move from the third industrial revolution, digitization, to the fourth, decarbonization. By building a co-op, built on a correct by construction, concurrent, scalable solution, RChain is structured to build out the new technology that will be required for a flourishing regenerative planet. Please join us on this journey.
Known about climate change since 1966. And this guy, Peabody Mining? Anyway, this guy's father had worked in the coal mining industry, and I don't know, his brother or cousin was throwing out like a whole bunch of old, documents that had been in like storage, and he decided to pull this one out because he thought his father was mentioned in it. And he's reading through this document, and it's like unbelievable that the coal industry knew since 1966 about global warming. And they even fund this group that does nothing but spread lies how carbon dioxide is actually good. And every time you turn your car on and pollute, you're actually helping God's earth. And he turns it into like this religious tone. I should be able to find it pretty quick. I mean, it's just like utterly amazing.
Was it a Huffington Post article? So I'm looking at one here that has the headline "Coal New to."
Yeah, it's incredible that they keep digging up. Well, digging up. Haha. It's actually not funny, but they keep unearthing. See, I'm on a roll today. Earlier and earlier dates that these fossil fuel executives and companies, and frankly scientists, because they do have scientists working for them. Unfortunately, they're scientists that are paid to cover up the information rather than give it to the public. But they do have scientists working for them. But unfortunately, we just keep finding out that it's an earlier and earlier date. It's the 80s, then it's the 70s, and it's the 60s. And what I find really frustrating is that if we had done something about the climate crisis, like starting even in the 80s, we would have had, 4 decades. We could have really, done something a lot less radical and gotten ourselves to a safe limit, 300 parts per million of carbon. And, we wouldn't have these incredibly radical storms and floods and droughts, and, arable land would not be at risk, and the nutrition in our food wouldn't be at risk, and all of these things that people are talking about now as a huge risk would not be, a crisis. We have so many lakes around the world that are drying up, that endangers the lives of hundreds of millions of people. All of this stuff that we're talking about now, that we're like, oh shit. If we had started back in the 80s, we would have been able to have plenty of time. But now, since we've literally burned up that time through inaction, and it's just so frustrating, because if we had started then, it would have been much easier.
Yep.
So that's that on that. But I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it just keeps showing over and over again that everybody really knew. And it's just so. And Bernie Sanders last night, I don't know if anybody watched the debate, but Bernie Sanders last night brought up the fact that he has, I don't know if it's a plan really, but, he brought up the possibility of prosecuting some of the executives who knowingly, misled the public on all of this stuff. They knew that, they had very careful estimations of what burning this level of fossil fuels was going to do to the planet and do to different people around the world. And they purposefully dissuaded people and, shareholders, because obviously you're not going to invest in a company that's going to destroy the planet. But they said, no, it's not going to do that. And they knew it was going to. So I would love to hear from people here now. Do you guys think it's right to prosecute people who knowingly misled the public, I think it's right to prosecute them.
Yeah, what I said on my when I posted it this morning, I said they should be treated as war criminals.
Yeah. I mean, if any of them are still alive, I mean,
Yeah,
if it's from the 60s, I don't know. But
yeah, I think many of them are.
yeah, I mean, who else do you guys think it's right to prosecute those people? I think it's absolutely right.
I think perhaps it's right. I don't know how much good it's going to do, though. Like, I guess if you can, I guess the purpose of it would be to deter anyone else from doing that now. So, if it helps in that regard, then great. But again, I always return back whenever I hear about fighting. I always return back to the Buckminster Fuller quote. It's like, if you really want to change something, you're kind of wasting your energy by fighting against the current thing. Just build a new thing and make the old one obsolete. And, but we
Yeah,
have to approach it at all fronts. So
Yeah, I never agreed
Well,
with him on that because it's also
Yeah.
why I didn't agree with Michelle Obama. I mean, you have to take the high road, and yes, ultimately you do. But if you don't shed a light on the evil, then just taking the high road or building something new, there's no historical perspective. And
yes, this is true.
and so I think actually you need to do both.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, and I think also, in addition to prosecuting those people because they did something so horrible, and in some cases, like maybe for us, it didn't like harm us, but there are a lot of people who died from cancer, and like there are a lot of people who died in coal mines, and there are a lot of people who live near these places where they drill, and there are a lot of people who died in natural disasters that perhaps wouldn't have happened. Like we don't know. Maybe the science will get better and be able to tell us about that stuff. But but my point is, though, if we prosecute them, but we could also get an enormous amount of money and cleanups from them. So if we're able to get them to actually clean up some of these messes, that would be really helpful. Also, if we're able to get money back from them, then perhaps some of that money can go to helping some of the communities that have been harmed the most by the damage that a lot of these fossil fuel companies have done. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not just about throwing people in jail and just saying, oh, well, what does that do for the planet? I think that there's financial compensation that can go to some of these places, but also environmental justice that can go to some of these places. And probably, they're experts and, people that say that there's a lot more that can be done. But I think it's also about holding people to account when they commit crimes, against humanity, frankly.
Yeah, I think that it's perhaps I'm not against any of what you're talking about. I'm sure there's plenty of people who are going to do that. I'm not going to waste I think it's a waste. I'm not going to waste my particular energy on trying to prosecute and fight somebody. But I think what also could be a healthy thing to come out of this realization that there were people who knew or had just good solid information and chose to choose a path of deceit and trickery. I think that there's an underlying core mentality behind that, where these people are able to kind of remove their guilt, and to me it calls back to when Adam Smith talked about the invisible hand and introduced this idea that was completely co-opted almost immediately and taken out of context and turned into an entire religion around a free market where their externalities don't matter, and where somehow there's this collective, so-called collective intelligence that guides us, this invisible hand. It's almost like a deity. And so they kind of go, well, I'm just searching for profit, man. I'm just out for my own self-interest. That's what's good, right? Ayn Rand said that it's a virtue, and so that's where that mentality started. And I think that, to really solve that, you kind of have to dig into the psychology of it. These people don't willfully go, ha ha ha, I'm destroying the planet, this is awesome, I'm the Joker, you know.
Right.
They're kind of removing their guilt based around a religion. And the religion is this false notion of a free market that takes care of itself.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I definitely think that, whether, this is kind of getting a little bit more broad, but I think whether the world or America, decides to continue down the road of capitalism, or whether, things change a little bit, I definitely think if we want to continue to live, human beings, we need to decide to embrace the fact that there need to be no more disposable people and no more disposable places,
Mhm.
which basically is, that's, loosely based off of some ideas from the Green New Deal, but it's
Mhm.
just some, millennial environmental justice talk. But basically, it is responding to what you said about externalities. Is basically we
It
need to
is.
embrace that we just can't dispose of anything anymore. That we need to um, treat everyone and every place like it is like it is sacred, and it will be with us forever. You know what I mean? And it's valuable. And
Yeah.
I don't think that was always the case, like just put some people in a coal mine and just see, like, and if it collapses, well, just call the insurance company. And, that stuff happened to John Oliver, did such a great job of reporting on it. And, um, you know, and there's so many beautiful places around the world that have gotten destroyed and continue to be destroyed by this thinking. And we need to get into the idea that trees and whales and all these beautiful things are worth more when they stay intact, and I think that thinking is sorely needed, these days. So we'll see if we're able to get there
Well,
in
I
time.
believe we will, and I think that I talk about this sometimes, maybe too much, but I do believe that demographics play a key role, and demographically speaking, the most influential generation is about to be the Gen Z generation, just strictly based on population and coming of age of a generation. And I've been noticing over the last week, there's been some memes that have come to my attention. I don't know, maybe I'm late to the game, but have you guys heard of the OK Boomer meme?
Yes.
Well, I mean, yeah, but the okay boomer meme is a meme that's about the mentality of the boomers. It really has nothing to do with the age. I mean, there are a lot of boomers that are my age, so it's really about that mentality more than the age of the person, really. So
Okay, well, I'm going to just take a quote from this one article.
sure, yeah.
The headline being, now it's war. Gen Z is finally snapped over climate change and financial inequality. And here's a quote. The older generations grew up with a certain mindset, and we have a different perspective. A lot of them don't believe in climate change or don't believe people can get jobs with dyed hair. And a lot of them are stubborn in that view. Teenagers just respond, okay, boomer. It's like, we'll prove you wrong. We're still going to be successful because the world is changing.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I think to me that represents the future. I think that, me as a cusp boomer Gen X, so I was born right on the cusp. I could have either gone boomer or Gen X. I ended up going more Gen X, but for me as an elder in that realm, my job, in my opinion, is just to support you guys. That's really the way I feel.
yeah. I think it's more about rallying around certain causes and ideologies. I mean, I think, the more that we draw lines around gender or nationality or age or anything like that, the more we're going to have divisions that hold us back. I think, we have so much more in common when we talk about technology, blockchain, or we talk about the environment, climate crisis. We're talking about the kind of world we want to build. When we talk about coordination, communications, all that stuff. We talk about politics, which we often talk about at the beginning of this call. Sure, Derek probably won't put it in the ending, but there's so much to talk about in the world. Economic insecurity, there's so much different stuff, and I think that but if you look politically at what's happening, two of the most popular candidates in the Democratic race are the oldest ones. Actually, I think all three of them are the oldest ones, but two of the most progressive ones are the oldest ones. And so I don't really know if like the okay boomer meme, I guess it's funny. It can be funny if it's prefaced by the right comments, but I actually think it's more in responding to a certain type of comment rather than somebody of a certain age group, if that makes any sense. Like I
see what you're saying, but
I can think of a lot of people who are in their 20s who think like that. Do you know what I mean? And like, you know what I mean? But
it's talking about the law of averages and demographics, age demographics. So yes, I mean, of course, you're talking to somebody right here who is a Gen X boomer who completely and entirely loves the Generation Z perspective.
Yeah, but there are a lot of people who are in that age group that I would never say that to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, I just think like if we really want to save the world, we should just find people who have who care about the same things that we care about, and who can band together around the important things, and also who have differing opinions than us, and who can weave the fabric of consciousness together and just drive us forward. Do you know what I mean? Because
but the one thing that I'll just differ with you here is, and Greta said it in her speech, and I just, as a parent, I can't help but think about this every minute of the day. I live this in my life. I'm not going to have to deal with the shit that you are going to have to deal with, and my daughter's going to have to deal with. So I bow down to your generation and what your people have to say, because you're the ones who are going to have to do all the fucking hard work. Pardon my French, but that's where my passion is, and that's why I love you. I want to help you. So that's all I have to say about that.
Well, that's why you're not a boomer, because you understand this stuff. A boomer would be like, oh, you're so entitled, and like you guys just are like on your phones all day, and like could you just like get a job and just like capitalism is like not that bad, like that's like what a boomer would say. And so I appreciate that, Daryl. And I mean, like we are facing some pretty tricky stuff, like it would be really great if like 10, 20, 30 years from now, we're not looking at a planet where we cannot grow food, like the problems that the millennials and younger face. We are not complaining on Twitter about things that are just nominal, like, oh, somebody didn't like my Instagram post. Like, this is real shit. It's real shit. It's getting real out there, like we are not just deciding to not have children because like we're bored or like we're lazy or something. Like we really don't want to populate the planet more. That's the real tea. That's the real tea out there. That's what like a lot of people don't understand. And it's like and people are like, oh, they're striking from school, like what a bunch of rebels, like, but that we strike from school because we are seeing like the forests are like going away, and Congress and like all of these governments, they're like completely ineffective, and there's all this stuff going on, and like it's just a little bit scary. It's not a little bit scary, it's like it's tremendously scary. And so I think the boomer thing, it really just came out of all of what I'm talking about. And so I'm talking way too long now. We should talk about blockchain.
Well, in my opinion, we are. In my opinion, we are talking about blockchain, but perhaps it's not really directly implied.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting, guys, because I think that when I first got into the blockchain space, I really felt like, oh, I found my people, because there were so many people who were really, really concerned about decentralization. And then when the economic uptick happened, it was really full of speculators, and a lot less. The voice of decentralization was very drowned out, and but I think blockchain has to recognize the principles upon which it was built, right? And Satoshi was very much working with a decentralization point of view. At least that's my read on things. And that decentralization, I think, is essential to addressing the problems that we're talking about. The decentralization is, I was recently writing an RChain prospectus, and one of the things that it had occurred to me. I mean, I sort of knew it, but I didn't know it until I said it out loud to myself. In the same way that I've talked about how when capital is, regardless of your politics, when capital is concentrated in the hands of a few, that dramatically restricts the total number of modes of coordination we can use capital to implement.
Yeah,
right?
Well worded.
Right. I mean, it's just like it really doesn't matter whether you're Keynesian. What matters is the mathematics there, and you can't go and explore these other models. And the same is true when data is concentrated in the hands of a few, right? I mean, what's happened is that with the centralization of these platforms, these digital asset management platforms, which the market has responded to, right? The market is obviously concerned about this, and that is, it's like that's why GDPR has happened. That's why the decentralization movement has happened, is because the market is concerned about the centralization of data assets and what it means for online digital identity, and what it means for lots and lots of coordination. But the issue is when data is concentrated in the hands of a few, it also limits our coordination modes, and that's something that we're at a point now where we have to coordinate on a global scale. It's inescapable, and so we have to have these additional modes, and that's where we hope blockchain can lend a hand, if it scales. But only if it scales.
Only if it scales.
So Greg, I have a question then, a very simple question. So is with staking, isn't holding coins no different than holding hash rate? So for example, like the reason why Bitcoin's insecure is because its security model relies on hash rate. Is that equal to the?
No, it isn't.
Well, okay,
no,
can
it
you
really
explain
isn't.
Why? Because more hash rate does not get you more security. So why, like, more capital is concentrated into shards or onto the RChain's network, how does the security model increase? Because it doesn't increase in Bitcoin's case, right? like more ASIC mining, more capital into the miners does not increase the security. It's a security theater, right? So can you kind of describe, because you understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
I think you're making a false equivalence.
Okay, please
They're not equivalent at all, and sort of it's sort of hard to it's hard to respond because they're like you've set up a bunch of presumptions in your question. So the security of the proof of stake, the Casper-based proof of stake, comes from the distribution of the stake. That's basically what it comes from. And you get to see, you can observe in the network. You can look at the validators and you can look at their stakes. And if there's an 800-pound gorilla, then you know what the security is. If the stake is distributed more evenly, then you know what the security of that network is. But it's really about the transparency of it. And now, once you add sharding to the mix, then you can explore lots of different sort of web of different security models. And that's the thing that's much more interesting, is because now all the security is explicit, it's out in the open, you know exactly what you're getting. There's no...
I'm not following, because in Bitmain's case, even if they have offices in the United States and they move all their miners to the United States and their full nodes are online and mining, you don't know if they're owned by Bitmain or not. So in the same sense of 800-pound gorilla on the network, yeah, they're like, of course a gorilla is not going to put all his coins into one shard. So I'm not, I guess maybe.
So with respect to digital identity,
okay,
if that's your question. So what you have to do is you have to set it up, and that's where the Casper incentives come from. You have to set it up so that there's more incentives to have fewer nodes that virtually map back to the same hardware or software.
Oh, okay.
Right. That's so as long as you have a close to 1-to-1 ratio between the validator identity and actual distinct hardware, then you have then the security is directly related to the validator stake table.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to take up the whole talk. It's just interesting to me because it may be a false equivalency because I don't know enough about software architecture. But to me, at least in Bitcoin's case, like more hash rate does not get you more security. So
it does. No, and I mean the real issue is you can have all these weird economic circumstances that make it easily possible for a 51% attack. That's I mean, with Bitcoin, that's the reality behind the security issue, right? 51% attacks, were considered to be too difficult, and now we've seen that that's not the case at all. And you only have to look to last year and the whole Bitcoin Cash thing. Right, 51% attacks are absolutely mountable under a wide range of economic conditions.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, because it's almost it's a social engineering attack, more than a brute force just take over the miners, right?
Well, I mean, it comes down to politics, right?
Yes.
If you can get enough, common interest aligned, then you're then you can engineer a 51% attack. It's a lot harder to engineer those kinds of attacks in a sharded network, right?
Right, because it's not contentious. You can just say, "I'm moving over here," and
exactly. People can move. Shards can reconfigure. Right, so it's a more resilient, more robust kind of situation. Right. I mean, and again, going back to try to weave together the two conversations, I'm trying to get scale. I'm trying to get scalable architecture by imitating what nature does with ease. Nature scales with ease. Now, I say that fully aware that if you go look at the individual level, if you go look at individual ant hills or beehives or individuals inside a herd of gazelles, their lives is are full of suffering. there's no question. But at the level of, you know, these large scale, the nature scales, you know, with ease. It doesn't break a sweat to scale. And so we, you know,
Yeah,
hello?
we're all here.
Okay, so, and in my opinion, that's what connects the two conversations. You know, the more we talk about what is good for the planet, I think we'll find that, you know, that tells us, you know, what's good for software and these kinds of systems, these infrastructure systems that we're trying to build. And the more we talk about, you know, really sound and robust software architectures and infrastructure, the more we'll find that it has to come into alignment with what's good for the planet.
Okay, well, that was great. And I'd also like to add something that I found in my research this past week. Daryl might also have another article that I sent to him, which I thought might be fascinating. It's actually a year old, but this one just came out last week. I just linked it in the chat. It's about Bitcoin and the waste that it produced.
Oh yeah.
That it produces, pardon me. If anybody wants to click on it, it just talks about how much it impacts the climate and the environment. And I just think this is such a big opportunity for our chain to talk about, not only just on this call in general, maybe like Greg, you could talk a little bit about this if you want, but also I just think it's a really big opportunity, like with mainnet coming out soon, hopefully soon. Just like we have a big opportunity to talk about how much of an improvement our chain is over Ethereum and Bitcoin in these respects, you know, because a lot of people hear blockchain and they just think, great, more environmental degradation, you know?
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
So I just think, like, you know, just like people used to think, for example, you know, great, electric car, that means it's going to be slow, or, you know, like whatever. But I think there's just a big opportunity. Like, I don't think that our chain talks enough about that. You know, there's so many things that our chain does talk about, like security, scalability, there's a lot of that stuff, but I don't think that our chain does talk enough about the environmental improvements. So I think that's a really big opportunity because it does get pointed out in the press how wasteful Bitcoin is. And there are a lot of green blockchain projects. That's to the point now that I've been doing some research on funding for our chain. I don't know if you saw my email, Greg, but now I'm starting to find funds that are actually interested in funding green blockchain projects. So there's a whole movement in this direction.
Yeah, well, we have been
So-
talking about it. I mean, in 2015, it's funny, I remember I had this really interesting conversation with Ed Eichhold because we were working on Scenario at the time. And I had just done the sort of back of the envelope calculations that made it clear to me that, you know, it just wasn't going to be the case that Bitcoin was sustainable. And, you know, and on top of all the security issues that I was identifying when you try to glue a blockchain on the side of some other decentralized data solution. And I said, look, you know, we just, you know, we have to go with some kind of proof of stake or other kind of mechanism because, you know, proof of work is not sustainable. And he was like, well, you know, one step at a time. And I just simply said, no, this is, you know, the situation is too dire. You know, we cannot get behind a.
It doesn't even make any sense. Like if you look at, okay, you had the Model T, and now you have Tesla. So it's I don't even one step at a time. It's like, mate, like we have better technology, so we're going to implement it. Period. There is no waiting around.
Mm-hmm. Well, remember, in 2015, Casper was just a gleam in Vlad's eye. You know, he said he had a protocol, but he didn't.
Greg, can you comment more on just technically how forks can rejoin the network? Like when you fully fork the source code, like what conditions allow them to come back and meet?
But I've mentioned this before. It doesn't really matter whether it's an external network or it's an instance of our chain. You can still mount them into the sharding tree. So you treat every external chain as if it's a shard.
Okay, that's easy enough for me to understand. Then that's awesome, because I thought it's a bit different when you just actually are fully forking the source code, but because it's as you're saying, you treat it like a shard. Easy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
But back to your question or your comment, Nora. Yeah, we can dramatically reduce the kind of wasteful hardware that you see. I mean, I still have to do a lot more calculations before I'm convinced that even this is a good solution, because there's still some churn in the messages that go back and forth in Casper. It's quite a bit lower than the churn that you see with proof of work. But you have to, you know, if we're going to be scientific about this, you actually have to do the calculations and make sure that there's, you know, you haven't just pushed the bubble into a different part of the carpet.
Yeah. That makes sense. So more tests are needed, but for sure it's less.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's way less wasteful than proof of work.
Yeah.
Greg,
in
Greg,
terms of how much less we need to do more work.
No.
Greg, I recently was watching an interview. I don't know if you agree with this sentiment or not, but the gentleman was saying that in order to work on Bitcoin Core, you need to be already elite, and it takes about 9 months of training. With working on RChain source code, and if you want to get involved, if you're like, you know, experienced Scala developer, the cycle time to get up to speed is not 9 months on RChain source code, right?
Depends on the developer.
Yeah. Okay.
It really does.
I don't know how complicated Bitcoin Core's software is though, or what the standards are in terms of what they need, but it seems that's a long time to get, you know, a developer integrated into the team if you're working at that level.
Well, this is what actually I was having exactly this conversation with a potential investor this week, right? They were saying in China they have a workforce of 500 people, and their outlay was only, you know, $500K a month, and I was trying to counter, you know, pretty honestly, look, our chain doesn't need 500 people. Our chain needs 10 of the top tier developers. And that's been the profile for quite some time. So, you know, we have a different kind of burn rate, and people don't understand that. Relative, you know, if you think about it, it is rocket science relative to the technology out there. Every technologist I've talked to who has, you know, doesn't have a background in this, when I start to explain what's going on, when they really start to get it, they go, whoa, this is really different. I thought this was just going to be another copy of Ethereum or something like that. And then whoa, this is a very, very different architecture, very, very different considerations. We go after, we have an unusual mix of distributed systems and formal methods. And not a lot of people do that. They're either distributed systems geeks or they're formal methods geeks, but they don't put the two together. And we're one of the few projects that puts the two together. So a developer can work on any one component of our chain relatively quickly. But the issue of understanding the full scale, full scope architecture is still something that takes quite a bit of time.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I kind of expect some degree of standards, like 3 to 6 months to get fully up to speed on the entire scope of the stack. So yeah, I guess we're still kind of in line with industry standards, just because of the problems we're working on. They're not simple C code, right? It's totally different.
Yeah.
Greg, would you
That's right.
mind? Sorry, go ahead.
No, after you.
I was just going to ask, would you mind explaining formal methods to the layperson, i.e. me?
Sure. So when we're talking correct by, it's actually a really, really important point. Formal methods is a term of art in the industry that refers to using mathematics, and in particular, the mathematics that underlies theoretical computer science, to ensure that the software has a high degree of quality. The gold standard is when the code that you have written, the code that's actually running, is automatically proven correct by a theorem prover or something else. So this is the kind of thing that Intel spent millions and millions of dollars on after they hit that arithmetic bug in their hardware some time back. I think it was back in the mid 90s. They hit a bug with one of their processors in the arithmetic, and that could have brought down huge swaths of the industry, and so that's very, very bad for business. And so they hired a bunch of mathematicians to formally verify not just the design, but the actual things that were running, without going into a lot of details. So and correct by construction, which is the methodology that we use, is a refinement of that idea, and it goes back historically a long time. I'll give just a brief thumbnail sketch of that after I sort of give the punchline. So the punchline is that you extract programs from the proofs of their correctness. So that's a little bit of a brain twist if you stop and think about that for a minute. So what you're really doing is you're making a formal proof that you can get from one specification, which describes some state of the system that you're trying to design, to another state that is desirable, or not just a single state, but these are ranges of states, whole sets of states or collections of states. And once you have those proofs, the question is, well, how would I construct a program that sort of follows this logic? And it turns out that you can, in many instances, extract programs from proofs. And this goes all the way back to, historically, it goes all the way back to Brouwer, who is a mathematician over 100 years ago. Satisfied by certain kinds of proofs. So there's quite a bit. So you want to prove that something exists, or you want to prove that something is the case. And so you assume that it isn't the case, and then you proceed step by step until you reach an absurdity. And so since the thing that you assumed in all of this was that something was not the case, then therefore it must be the case. That's proof by contradiction, and it relies upon a logical law called the law of the excluded middle, right? So you either have A or not A, but there's nothing in between. Another way to say it is that not A is the same as A. So those are both equivalent notions or expressions of the law of the excluded middle. So mathematicians would use this to prove the existence of certain mathematical objects. So they would start off by saying, well, assume that such and such an object does not exist, and then they would reach a contradiction. And therefore, the object must exist is the conclusion. So what that means is you proved it exists, but you have no idea how to construct it. You don't know what it looks like. You don't know what it feels like. You have no intuitions for its structure. You just know that it's there. So Brouwer was very dissatisfied with this approach. And he argued that instead, if you're going to prove the existence of something, you can't use the law of the excluded middle. So in fact, he started redoing the foundations of mathematics, and it became this movement called intuitionistic mathematics. And over time, this became formalized in a kind of logic. So intuitionistic logic. It jettisoned the law of the excluded middle. And then people connect or independently, completely independently. Alonzo Church and Haskell B. Curry and Alan Turing came over to help them at one point. We're thinking about notions of computation. What is a function when you think of it as a rule? And they invented something called the lambda calculus. And lo and behold, the lambda calculus turned out to be closely related to intuitionistic logic. So the lambda calculus is at the heart of the programming languages like Scala or Haskell or Clojure or any number of OCaml, F#. All of these languages have, which are relatively popular today, have the lambda calculus at its heart. And modern movements like the whole query integration, language integrated query stuff, LINQ, and all of that stuff uses the lambda calculus extensively. So the lambda calculus is not just some theoretical thing, it's really at the heart of a lot of modern programming. So it turns out that there's this close correspondence between intuitionistic logic, the formulae correspond to the types for the lambda calculus, and the proofs correspond to the programs. And once that correspondence was noticed, then the idea of program extraction from proofs was born. Now, Abramsky extended, so that whole correspondence between proofs and programs and formulae and types was called the Curry-Howard isomorphism. And so this idea of being able to extract programs from proofs so that your running code is the thing that is the witness to the proof of its own correctness. That idea is correct by construction. So that's not what Vlad, in his most recent talk at DEF CON, calls correct by construction. But that's the meaning in the industry. That's so if you go and look at the actual literature, if you go spend time with the people who develop the notions of correct by construction, this is what they meant.